Daddy, is Ghost coming? Her voice trembled, so small, so fragile. Madison's little fingers curled into my palm, her entire world hanging on my answer. She didn't know who Ghost was. Not really. She only knew something terrible had happened, and she needed a promise only that name seemed to hold. I knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her damp forehead. Ghost is already here, sweetheart. A small, exhausted smile touched her lips before her eyes fluttered shut, sleep finally winning its battle with pain. I stood and turned to Victoria. She was in the doorway, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She had heard everything. And unlike Madison, she understood. The shape of her fear shifted, twisting into something new. Who is Ghost? Ethan. Her voice was caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. Someone I used to be. And what did he do? I met her gaze, no flinching, no hesitation. He made bad people disappear. She recoiled as if the words themselves were sharp enough to cut. No, Ethan, you can't do this. Can't just throw your life away. This isn't revenge, I said, my voice low and steady. This is justice. Justice. Sound like a psychopath. No, I whispered, the word barely audible. I'm talking like the part of me I tried so hard to bury. The man you married, he was the disguise. Ghost was the truth. And Ghost failed our daughter once. It will not fail her again. Just then, my phone buzzed. A message from Harrison. He'd delivered. The file contained everything I needed. Rodriguez's safe houses, the people he trusted, the ones he used as shields. It had the routes he thought were invisible, the back doors he paid cops to keep open, and every mistake he'd made because power had made him sloppy. I leaned down and kissed Madison's forehead. I'll fix this, I whispered. I promise. Then I stood and walked past Victoria. The look she gave me was one of pure horror, like she was watching a stranger wearing her husband's skin. I stepped out into the night. East LA has a smell that clings to you. It's a mix of smoke, hot asphalt, and the kind of fear that disguises itself as obedience. Rodriguez ran this area like his personal kingdom, but kingdoms built on fear are always the first to fall. I drove slowly, my eyes scanning everything. Every shadow that moved, every figure that didn't. The murals on the walls weren't just art. They were symbols, declarations of territory. I wasn't intimidated, I wasn't impressed, I was calculating. This wasn't just a battlefield, it was a blueprint. By the time I reached the outskirts of Viper's Den, a former strip club, Rodriguez had converted into his own little fortress. I already knew its weaknesses. There were lookouts on the rooftops pretending to be casual observers. Guards were stationed at points Rodriguez thought were unpredictable. The same corrupt cops he bribed circled the block with their lights off. A pathetic attempt at a routine check. It was perfect. He thought this neighborhood belonged to him. He believed every face reported back to him. That power grew from numbers and noise. He didn't understand that true power grows from silence and precision. I parked 3 blocks away and slipped into a narrow, dark alley. And then I felt it happen. The change. My breathing slowed. My pulse steadied. Every sound in the city sharpened. Every movement I made became deliberate, economical. Ghost wasn't a person. He was a state of being. A mindset I had spent years fighting, denying, burying under a mountain of family dinners and the illusion of a normal life. But now he was awake. I melted into the shadows, observing the structure, the guards, the rhythm of their movements. They were confident, overconfident. Their bravado made them sloppy, and sloppiness made them vulnerable. So I waited. I waited until the guard at the back door got bored enough to start scrolling on his phone. I waited until the lookout on the roof turned his attention toward the distant wail of sirens. I waited until the streetlights flickered, a common enough occurrence in this part of LA that no one would even look twice. And then I moved. Silent, controlled, precise. The first guard never saw me coming. A hand over his mouth, a quick shift of his balance, a controlled descent to the ground. He wasn't harmed, just removed from the equation without a sound. I took his access badge. Inside, the club smelled of stale alcohol and cheap perfume ground into old carpets. The main room was dark, lit only by the eerie red glow of neon strips along the walls. It reminded me of other places I'd infiltrated years ago. Different names, different cities, but always the same blinding arrogance. I moved through the corridor with the unhurried pace of someone who belonged there. Footsteps echoed up ahead. I ducked into a small maintenance closet and waited as two of Rodriguez's lieutenants walked past, arguing about money. Their conversation told me everything I needed to know. Rodriguez was planning something big. Bigger than drugs, bigger than territory. Something that required new alliances, absolute silence, and a whole lot of fear. This just made it even more personal. This wasn't just about retaliation for what he did to my daughter anymore. This was now about prevention. I reached the VIP hallway. A single guard was leaning against a pillar, lazily scrolling through security feeds on a tablet. He didn't even look up as I approached, my stolen badge and calm stride giving me the appearance of purpose. When he finally glanced at me, a flicker of confusion crossed his face. But by then, it was already too late. A simple redirection of his wrist made him drop the tablet. I caught it midair, preventing the clatter that would have given me away. The guard slumped unconscious to the floor a second later. I quickly tapped through the security feeds on the tablet. Rodriguez wasn't here. He was at a meeting across town in a warehouse he used for what he called private negotiations. If Harrison S. file was accurate, and Harrison S. files were always accurate. Rodriguez was finalizing a partnership that would expand his operation beyond anything local law enforcement could pretend not to see. I left the den the same way I came, in silently, unnoticed. The night air smelled different now, felt charged, anticipatory. I could feel the city shifting around me as unseen players made moves they thought were invisible. But the ghost didn't just hunt threats. He studied them, predicted them, and dismantled them piece by piece. I got back in my car, pulled up the map on my phone, and rerouted toward the warehouse district. As I drove through the sleeping city, my phone buzzed again. A single message from Harrison. Careful, Rodriguez isn't your only problem tonight. Of course, he wasn't. That was always the thing about ghosts. They'd never just haunt one place. They lingered everywhere. The warehouse sat on the edge of industrial territory, tucked between train tracks and shipping containers. Trucks rumbled in the distance, their headlights slicing through the fog like blades. The building was bland by design, a structure no one would look at twice, even if they passed it every day. But I wasn't looking at the building. I was looking at the perimeter. Guard patterns, predictable cameras, outdated. Entry points, mediocre at best. Rodriguez liked to act like he was a mastermind, but masterminds didn't rely on intimidation alone. They prepared for the unexpected. He didn't. I scaled a storage container and crouched low, watching as a convoy arrived. 3 SUVs, high-end models, tinted windows, engines too quiet to be stock. Inside Rodriguez, 2 of his top lieutenants, and someone I didn't recognize. Probably the new partner. They entered the warehouse through a side door. 2 guards stayed behind, talking about sports and weekend plans. I moved before their laughter faded, dropping between the containers with the silence of falling dust. My steps didn't echo. A breath didn't fog the air. The door wasn't locked. That was mistake number 3. Mistake number 1 was targeting my daughter. Mistake number 2 was assuming I was still Ethan, the husband who did school drop-offs and grocery runs and pretended the world was simpler than it was. I slipped inside. Voices echoed from the central office. I followed them, pacing my steps with the rhythm of their conversation. They were arguing. Rodriguez never liked arguing. He wasn't used to people questioning him. You promised a clean route. Someone shouted. I gave you one, Rodriguez snapped. If your people can't handle, don't start with that. The new voice interrupted. This project requires precision. We invest millions. We expect a return. I made sure your investment was protected, Rodriguez said. By attacking a child, the voice hissed. What kind of message does that send? I froze mid-step. They hadn't targeted Madison by mistake. Rodriguez was instructed. Relax, Rodriguez said, waving off concern. It was minor pressure. Nothing long-term. The father won't do anything stupid. He's former intelligence, the new partner said. You don't poke someone like that? You think he's coming after me? Rodriguez laughed. Please. He's soft now. Family made him weak. I almost stepped into the room right then. Not violently, not loudly. Just enough to let him see how wrong he was. But patience was a weapon. Timing was precision. If I entered now, I'd get answers, but not the ones I needed. There was something more happening, something bigger than Rodriguez's ego and greed, something that made his partner nervous. I stayed hidden. Look, Rodriguez said, ghost doesn't exist anymore. It's just a myth. I allowed myself a small breath. Myth. Good myths weren't tracked. Myths weren't suspected. Myths were underestimated until it was too late. I listened for another 10 minutes. They talked about shipments, routes, silent partners overseas. It's plans that relied on corrupt officials turning blind eyes. Nothing surprising, nothing new. Except one detail. They were planning to expand into areas involving families. Families like mine because they were low-risk, leveraged targets. My daughter wasn't an accident. She was a test, a warm-up, a demonstration. The room fell silent after that revelation. Rodriguez dismissed the meeting and escorted his partner to the SUVs. After they left, the warehouse grew quiet again. I stayed in the shadows and waited. A second convoy arrived 20 minutes later. Unexpected, unplanned. When the door opened, I recognized the man stepping out. Detective Nolan, a cop I once trusted. A man who gave my daughter a stuffed animal on her birthday 2 years ago. He entered the warehouse alone. He wasn't looking for Rodriguez. He was here to cover up the evidence of the meeting. My jaw tightened. Betrayals from enemies were expected. Betrayals from friends carried a different sting. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Yeah, it's clean. No cameras, no witnesses. Tomorrow will claim it was a routine inspection. Rodriguez gets a free pass. Now I stepped into the faint glow of the warehouse lights. Evening, Nolan. He froze. Slowly, he turned. Ethan, he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. What are you doing here? I should ask you the same. He swallowed. Look, I know this looks bad. It doesn't look bad, I said. It looks deliberate. He raised his hands defensively. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. He lowered his gaze. Ethan, you don't understand the people involved. This isn't something you can just walk into. You're right, I said. I'm not walking in. He frowned. What is that? I'm already inside. His face drained of color. He tried to speak again, but I cut him off. You knew what they did to my daughter. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, Nolan said desperately. I tried to minimize it. I tried to keep you out of it. You failed. You don't know what's at stake, my daughter. That's not Ethan. Listen, you had a choice, I said quietly. You chose wrong. He opened his mouth, then closed it. His breathing was uneven. His shoulders trembled. What now? He whispered. Now, nothing. Now, everything. You go home, I said, surprising him. You stay there. You stay out of this, okay? And you don't speak to Rodriguez again. Ethan, if I walk away, no one will touch you, I said, because they'll be too busy looking over their shoulder for the ghost. He stared at me like he was seeing a version of me he had only heard rumors about, a version of me he prayed he'd never meet. He nodded slowly and backed away. When he left, I walked deeper into the warehouse, studying the layout, memorizing every inch. This place was a linchpin in Rodriguez's operation. It wasn't enough to confront him. It wasn't enough to pressure him. I needed to dismantle him, piece by piece, quietly, strategically, irreversibly. That night was the beginning. The next day, I began tracing Rodriguez's networks, businesses, false identities, suppliers, corrupt officials, henchmen with predictable habits. Every move I made was invisible. Every step dissolved into the next. I didn't storm locations. I infiltrated them silently. I didn't confront people. I nudged circumstances until they imploded. I didn't lash out. Ghost didn't lash. Ghost dismantled. I targeted his finances first. Counts froze without warning. Business partners cut ties after receiving anonymous evidence. His suppliers backed out due to unconfirmed risks that suddenly felt too real. Rodriguez wasn't afraid yet. But he was irritated, and irritation made him sloppy. Next, I removed his outer circle. Not violently, not dramatically. I simply eliminated their ability to function. Lost keys, disabled vehicles, anonymous warnings. Personal secrets quietly exposed to the people they feared most. Within days, half of them fled the city. Rodriguez started losing sleep. He paced in his office. He snapped at his guards. He demanded answers no one could give. Because myths didn't leave fingerprints. Meanwhile, I never stopped watching him. From rooftops, from alleys, from crowds where 1,000 faces blurred into one. Changed his routes, then changed them again. Avoided the den. He avoided the warehouse. He avoided anything he once thought was safe. Floyd was learning. Good, but not fast enough. The next step was psychological. Rodriguez prided himself on being feared, so I took fear away from him and gave it back tenfold. One night, as he exited his car, he found a single item on the ground beside his tire. Madison's broken hair clip. Not the original. A replica. But he didn't know that. His hands trembled. His breath caught. He looked around wildly, cursing at shadows, at silence, at things he couldn't see. He doubled his security, tripled it. He didn't realize numbers didn't matter. Ghosts didn't fight crowds. Ghosts slipped through them. Every time he thought he found safety, I reached deeper. Whispers spread among his men. They claimed they saw something in their peripheral vision. Something they couldn't describe. Something they couldn't shake. A presence, a silence. A rumor. Ghost. Now fear followed Rodriguez like a shadow. And shadows were my domain. Weeks passed. Then one night, Harrison sent a message. Rodriguez is making a last move. Tonight he's running good. I wanted him isolated, desperate, predictable. I followed him to a secluded mansion in the hills, a property he thought no one knew about. Guards lined the exterior. Drones circled the perimeter. It was his last refuge. But refuges were cages, disguised as sanctuaries. I walked through the forest behind the mansion, silent between the trees. Steps timed with the wind brushing through leaves. I reached the back balcony and climbed. The lock on the sliding door took 6 seconds to manipulate. Inside, the mansion was dimly lit. Expensive art on the walls, overpriced statues. The decor of a man who wanted to prove status but lacked taste. Rodriguez stood in his study, pacing. He felt me before he saw me. His shoulders stiffened. His breath hitched. "You," he whispered, turning slowly. "Yes," I said. His eyes darted to the desk drawer, the weapon he kept there. I didn't stop him. I wanted him to feel the illusion of control. He opened the drawer, empty. His face went pale. When he breathed. "Hours ago." He swallowed. "You want to destroy me?" I stepped closer. "I already have." "You think this is justice?" He spat. "No," I said simply. "This is balance." His hands shook. He backed away until he hit the wall. "I didn't want to hurt her. It was a message. Just a message. You succeeded." I said. Message received. His voice cracked. "What now? Now?" Now I did what Ghost always did best. I ended things without theatrics, without spectacle, without unnecessary harm. Rodriguez was arrested within an hour. Harrison arranged everything. Every piece of evidence I had gathered aligned perfectly with existing investigations. When the police arrived, Rodriguez didn't resist. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He just stared at the floor, knowing the empire he built had crumbled without a single loud battle. Without a single dramatic confrontation. He wasn't defeated by force, was undone by precision. After it was over, I stood on the mansion balcony and watched the city below, the city he had tried to control with fear, now unaware that its shadows had shifted. Harrison appeared beside me. "You did it," he said softly. "No," I replied. "I restored balance. There's a difference. You're going home now." I exhaled. "Ghost goes home," I said. "But he doesn't disappear." Harrison nodded. "Then let's hope the world behaves." The drive home felt heavier than the mission. When I reached the house, Victoria sat on the couch, clutching a blanket. She looked up, eyes rimmed with worry. "Is it over?" she whispered. "Yes. And Ghost." I sat beside her. "He's part of me, always was. But he answers to me now, not the other way around." Madison woke up and ran into the room. She hugged me with all the strength her small arms could give. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Did Ghost protect us?" I smiled softly. Ghost protected everyone. I lifted her into my arms and carried her to her room. As she drifted to sleep, a calm I hadn't felt in years settled over me. Not peace. That wasn't something I believed I deserved, but clarity, acceptance. Ghost wasn't the monster I feared. He was the shield I needed. When the morning sun rose, the world looked normal again. Birds sang, traffic moved, people chased their routines. But deep inside, Ghost remained awake, watchful, silent, ready, not for revenge, for protection. Because the world was full of people like Rodriguez. And Madison would never fear shadows again. Not while I was alive. Not while ghosts walked beside me. Not while myths still had power. And as I stepped onto the front porch, feeling Victoria's hand slip into mine, I whispered a promise to myself. This time, Ghost would never fail her. Not now, not ever.